Welcome to TAMA Talks, brought to you by the Torrance Art Museum Advocates. I'm Janine Madden, current TAMA president, and I'd like to thank you for watching. Today, we will be chatting with artist Kim Manfredi, who was selected by the Torrance Art Museum as the 2024 Cycladic Arts Artist in Residence in Paros, Greece. The Cycladic Arts Program is an artist-run initiative that gives creatives the opportunity to live and work outside of their usual environment, providing them with an ideal place and time to reflect, research, and produce work. As part of the program, they are housed and work in a modern and functional space that has been created within the core of a traditional Cycladic house in Alyki, a seaside village of Paros. Artists will be inspired by a new place and a different culture to explore new ways of expression and experiment with new materials. This partnership is part of the Torrance Art Museum's continued effort to build global bridges and networks among artists, a cornerstone of their mission. The Torrance Art Museum Advocates were honored to be able to financially support this project. Our discussion today is being recorded and will be posted to our YouTube channel with all of our previous TAMA Talks. You can access it from our website, tamadvocates.com. Kim Manfredi is an American artist who graduated from the Maryland Institute College of Art, MICA, in 1988. She later returned to MICA, studying under the guidance of Grace Hardigan and Joyce Kozloff, and earned an MFA in painting in 2009. Following her MFA, Kim was represented by C. Grimaldi's Gallery and attended multiple residencies. Most recently, she is presenting a solo exhibition titled Lady Lazarus at Royale Projects in Los Angeles. Kim was also featured in Tutto a Tempo at the Camus Museum in Breno, Italy, and she has recently returned from her full fellowship from the Torrance Art Museum to attend Cycladic Arts residency in Paros, Greece. Kim will share with us how she was deeply inspired by how the Cycladic Arts location influenced her work. She commented on how the connection between history and environment was striking, revealing unexpected parallels between the ancient and contemporary worlds. Drawing from her Mediterranean heritage, she explored the ties between the Italian vase painters, Greek artisans in southern Italy around 300 BC, and the vibrant modern culture in Paros. This fellowship greatly expanded her understanding of art history as a tool for self-inquiry, allowing her to create work that is heart-centered. And so welcome, Kim. We're so grateful that you're here today to talk about this really exciting artist in residency. So welcome.
Thank you. And thanks for having me. Thanks for the opportunity to share about my experience, but even more so, thanks for the experience. It was transformative.
So glad to hear it. That's great. And we're pleased to say that you have amassed some images from your experience that you'll be sharing with us today.
Yeah. Should I just go?
Please.
Okay. So so as you mentioned in the intro, I went to the residency with a project, and of course that project expanded while I was there. So the project that I went with was to reimagine, explore this Southern Italian vase painting, which my family is from the southern part of Italy, both sides. And I felt as though looking at this art history, that would be a tangible way for me to connect my personal identity with Greek culture as it is today. So I started to look at these. There was a poet on the residency, which I'll talk about a little bit later, but she said they're not vase. They're vase. So if I go
Ah,
back and
yes.
forth between vase and vase, I
Okay.
apologize because my middle class roots would say vase,
Mhm.
but my aspiring sophisticated self would say vase. So so that was the project I came with, and I started with these ink drawings, which I'll talk more about in a second. But then when I got there, I became immediately interested in the local architecture. So I began a series of drawings about the local architecture. So I'll talk a little bit about those as well. And here's a very typical church in Alyki, and you can see the curves of the Cycladic architecture, and the blue of the sky matches the only color paint that I found used on the architecture, the blue. And then the other thing that was a surprise to me was that the beaches, or many of the beaches, were nude. And so at first, when I got there, my puritanical American roots was like, look the other way, look the other way. And even, feeling slightly threatened, the majority of the nudes on the beach were men. And so, feeling worried about being in the water with men who've just taken their shorts off and got in. At first, I was really hiding my eyes. And then as the month progressed, I thought, well, this is a good subject matter for painting. So I did a whole series of watercolors of remembered nudes on the beach. And then finally, as I mentioned, there were 3 residents in situ during my time there. One was a young painter named McKenna Overholt, and the other was a poet named Helen Farish. And while we were there, Helen's book was shortlisted for the T.S. Eliot Prize. And so we were celebrating her success and my show, and we decided that we wanted to do a collaboration. So there's a couple of slides here on based on a collaboration that I did with Helen, the poet in residence. So here we go. So I brought this white paper with me. It was given to me by a friend, and it was very beautiful paper, handmade rice paper, white as white could be. And I brought 24 sheets of it because it was very precious. And I thought that should be plenty of material for me to work on these very detailed line drawings that are typical of the way I explore much of art history. You see it on the left. Well, when I got there and I recognized how much time I was going to have each day for making art, I was like, I'm going to run out of my paper in like a week, So I scrounged through the shelves of leftover stuff, and I found this brown paper that you see on the left. And it's pedestrian butcher paper coated with wax on one side and matte on the other. There was a huge, maybe 5 or 6 inch pile of it, and I took one and I started to make a drawing on it, and I realized, my God, now I've found a way to add to the spectrum of artistic exploration I'm doing. So on the left side, you'll see a typical Southern Italian vase. This is a crater vase, and it's used for mixing wine or storing grains. And the decoration on this particular one, is from something like the Commedia dell'arte, these sort of humorous, boisterous plays that were meant to make people laugh and feel joy. The text that you'll see on this drawing is also a fragment of Sappho's poetry. So this leads to the collaboration that I do with Helen later. I came with the idea of including the fragments of Sappho in the drawings, because for the last 2 years, I've been exploring women in Baroque and Renaissance painting and reimagining those paintings from a more intersectional feminist perspective. So in order to continue that line of work without actually using the Renaissance paintings, I found what I perceive as a feminist Greek woman artist, and I was including her in the work as I, render these vessels, which are often a stand-in for the feminine body. So you have the detailed drawing on the left, and then on the right, I'm using this brown paper that I found. I brought metallic leaf, composition leaf in gold and silver and copper, and you'll see that used in the drawings. And then another local material I used is squid ink. And that was provided by the residency, and it's just a beautiful black ink.
Had you used any kind of ink like that before? Or was that a new medium?
It was brand new. It was,
wow.
it was really a discovery.
Excellent.
And this is just a detail of the line work on the white paper. So each vase will have a rendering of the decoration, right, that the artisans, ultimately Italian artisans, put on these Greek vessels. But the more I explore these, I start to replace these drawings with scenes from my everyday life in Paros. Again, here is just another example of an amphora type vase with a female figure on it, still traditional, but I'm beginning to abstract them a little bit. And this "The Meadow" is from a fragment of Sappho's poetry. And then on the left is the gestural squid ink drawing. Here, in this vase, I begin to include the local architecture. So if you remember the photograph of the church that I showed a few minutes ago, if you look in the drawing on the left, you'll see that that church is on the vase. And that's, again, an intervention into the classical imagery to make it more relevant to me and my experience there. And then the gestural drawing on the right. Here's the church again, and the representation of the church, or the placement of the church in the traditional scene. Again, the two versions, and if you look at this house on the vase to the left, you'll see here the local landmark that I was referring to. So here it almost completely replaces the traditional imagery and begins to wrap the vase, in my experience. You'll see this house comes up a lot. It was one of the first ones I found on a morning walk. Most mornings I would go 3 to 6 miles exploring the island. So they started to pile up. And so that was really exciting to me. And the brown paper is what allowed that kind of free gestural exploration to happen around the more architectural, tighter drawings. So you can, and what I started to do was, in many of them, I would have the ink drawing, and then I would have a black line drawing, and then I would have a gold leaf drawing, and then they would overlap a little bit. But it was nice to be able to make 2 on brown paper for every one that I made on the white paper. it was interesting for me because as an artist, the materials are so expensive and precious, right? That I notice I often deny myself. The other thing that the residency had was in the studio, they had bottles of tempera paint, little kid tempera paint. And it was so meaningful for me. That's what this blue background is. It was so meaningful for me because, I explore ancient art both in Renaissance and Baroque painting. I went to the Scrivani Chapel this year and studied the Giotto on a
Wow.
residency in Milan. And then here I am studying these Greek vases. And so for me, fresco, in a sense, and tempera, egg tempera, those are the first materials used by artists in my tradition. But they're also the first paints you're allowed to play with. So I
Right.
really enjoyed coming at this tempera and using it again so liberally. So this blue, which is an approximation of the blue that you see all over the island, began to work as a world on which to put my studies. So here I've incorporated the squid ink and the gold or metal leaf.
Did you have to mix the tempera to get that blue, or was that just
Yes,
the
I
okay?
did.
You
And you
did.
can see here as I continue to explore the architecture on my walks. Yeah, I used blue and white and yellow to try to make that blue. I think the base was a phthalo blue, though that seemed to work really well, better than the primary ultramarine blue. And so here you can see the tempera backgrounds in the image on the left on the sorry, it's the image, yeah, image on the left on the right hand wall. I started to explore these residences, and I've included a photograph of the actual residence and then the explorations of them in this gestural liberated way of painting. Here again is this house. I had to explore them many, many times. I could never really get it right, which was fantastic. And then to have this paper to work it on. So, and I felt like I was able to capture so much about the personality of these old buildings and the play that I think the artisans put into making them. They weren't rigid in any way. They were very irregular and very gestural and very full of splashes and chance operations. And I enjoyed that in looking at the buildings. And then I enjoyed that aspect of painting the buildings as well.
I was going to ask if you brought home any of the paper, but I realized that it may have been that that particular material was sort of integral to where you were and the images that you were creating, and it may not translate well back here in the States.
I know. I mean, that's what I thought myself. And plus, Demetra, the director of the residency, came in. She's like, "You're the third person who's used this paper," so I couldn't, I couldn't, in any consciousness, take the paper beyond what I use. I mean, maybe a few sheets I have here, but I haven't used them yet.
Yeah, I would think that when you use it, it would be very evocative, obviously, of your time there,
Yeah,
and whatever you create on it would have a
yeah,
very different feel based on just on the material.
yeah, exactly. And so you can see here's another example of the architecture. And if you look on the left-hand image on the right wall here, there's four explorations of that same building and in its situ. Well, actually, all of these are that building. Yeah. Not the top row, but the ones with the red background and the ones that are simply on the paper itself.
And is that your studio space or is
It
that
is.
oh,
It
very
is.
nice.
And it's a really nice studio. This is a shared studio space. The poet was supposed to be on the other side. So imagine a mirror of this behind. But she really enjoyed writing outdoors on the beach, in the garden, in her room. So after like 2 weeks, I was finally like, Helen, are you coming in? She said, no, I'm not coming in. And so I really had the whole space. I took up the whole space. And that's why I was able to hang all those drawings on the far wall when you saw the installation shot of the pots. So I was able to put them up and look at them and contemplate them while I was working, which was really nice. And the local architecture also included these fishing boats. There's a lot of politics around fishing in the Aegean and the government control of fishing and the loss of culture and passion for the residents when the seas, I guess, in a way became overfished. So there needed to be regulations, and the fishermen were paid handsomely to turn in their licenses and destroy their boats. And so you couldn't help but notice these little tiny crafts that the older generation continues to go out in. You know, I think they're still allowed to do recreational fishing, and the edges of the sea are just filled with them, and they're quite lovely.
And again, that repetition of the blue color, it's very interesting that they chose that for their boats as well.
Well, yeah, and you know, I asked, I said, is it patriotic? You know, because the Greek flag is just blue and white. And Demetra said yes. And I thought, my God, imagine if everything in the United States was red, white, and blue. I mean, it's just like so hard for me to get my head around that kind of conformity. But that's what it is. And aesthetically, it's
pride, I think, too. You know, I think there's a degree of pride also about the heritage and the history behind it. So
yes, I mean, yes, but you have to, I mean, being an artist, it's very hard for me to being an American artist, right? It's very hard for me not to be like, well, I want to do red, white, and purple. You know, like, I mean, it's just like, there wasn't one door that wasn't blue. Occasionally you'd see some light green, but that was in a very foresty setting. It was across the board. Yeah, and it was lovely. It really was. Nude beaches. As I said, when I first got to the beaches, I was shocked, you know, at how liberated everyone was. I felt so puritanical. I realized that somewhere in my body, we were three women swimming in the ocean. Somewhere in my body was like a cellular response to a man taking off his clothes and getting in the water with us. I was a little afraid for us. I didn't know what to think. And then we talked to the director about it, and she's like, this is what we do. It's wonderful. It's so liberating. Once you've swam without a suit, you know, you'll never go back. It's just us and the sea. And over time I developed this sort of comfort with it and a joy around it. And there was a book in the residency of Rodin's watercolors. And so I used that as a reference. They were all female models, not all, but most of them were female models in the book itself. And I just transformed the paintings to the men that I remembered on the beach. And here again, you can see the white rice paper in the center. I did a squid ink drawing on the brown paper to the left. Often this was the first one I made. And then I made a version with the copper, the composition leaf. One thing that Helen, the poet, and I talked about with this leaf was how it's so reminiscent of the glinting of the sea. And while you're in Paros and enjoying Paros, the color on the sea is constantly changed by the weather, by the sun, the time of day, the wind, the clouds, and that glinting is what I'm getting at with the use of the metal leaf. It's not why I brought it. I brought it because I thought of in rereading the Iliad and then that contemporary book called Achilles something. The money was all gold and metal, and so this exchange of energy took the form of metal, and that's why I brought the leaf with me as one of the few materials I brought. But in the end, it was the glinting of the sun on the ocean that kept me using the material.
Beautiful.
Thanks. Yeah, I did a lot of them. Oh, and yeah, and so the rocks on Paros are unbelievable. You will walk along the edge of the ocean, and there'll be rocks that are like broken marble with sharp edges and right angles and very rectangular in shape. And then you'll continue along and there'll be the smoothest, roundest pebbles you've ever seen. And then you'll walk a little further and there'll be pebbles that are no bigger than a cherry. And they're just been washed by the ocean for eons, and they're the most beautiful spectrum from white to sunny yellow. It's just magical. So every day on my walks, I would pick up a rock or two, and there was air dried clay in the studio. So there was a packet of white and a packet of red clay. So I was looking at the Cycladic statuary, and then also referring to the nudes that I saw on the beach.
Tremendous, really extraordinary. Oh my! So you can really see the scale.
Well, this
Wow.
is the collaboration that I started to do with Helen. And what I did was I took that brown paper and I glued 1, 2, 3, 4, 4 times 4. I probably glued 16 sheets together to make this large sheet. And her book of poems, oh God, I'm forgetting the title of the book, but maybe I will remember it, was about a love in the 70s, and a good section of the book was about their trip to Paros or the Greek islands, but Paros was included in that journey. So this is a small version of that larger one, which we just saw. I made a small version as I normally do, and I made one drawing on white paper as well, about the poems in the book. And then on the right here, she had me make these tempera squares, and she wrote poetry about me or my work or the director of the residency, McKenna, our young painter that was with us. And it was just a wonderful way after, we had 3.5 weeks. She did this all in the last half week of being together every day at 4:30. The 3 artists would get together, walk down to the beach, walk left or right, anywhere from 5 minutes to an hour and a half to find our own secluded little place to swim. And we would swim until the sun set, and then we would have dinner together. And it was remarkable that we got along so well, and that we were so supportive of one another. And this is a poem that Helen wrote about being an artist. It says, "My skin is lead white, but I cannot rest without working. Can't smell the roses, nor hear the fountain shake out its water, nor taste the soil's peach black until it exists on canvas.
And she wrote that about you.
Yeah, I'm guessing because
Wow.
I'm pretty miserable until I've gotten in the studio. And it's so funny because you're in Greece and they're like, let's take trips here or trips there. And I took 3 excursions across the island, but it was a struggle for me because there was an infinity right there in my backyard of the unknown and so much to explore that I didn't really want to go to another island, or go on long overnight trips because of the treasure of the residency itself, and the desire to put down on the paper what I was experiencing. The fact that I went from these vases to the architecture to the nude beaches was a real surprise and a real joy, and that was all what I would describe as the infinity of that immediate place.
Sure. I'm sure Dimitra was beyond pleased to hear that assessment of the location. So
She was fantastic. I mean, so supportive of everything, so supportive of the work. We had a studio visit with her. She was getting ready for a show in an exhibition in Athens. So we got to go into her studio and spend some time looking at the elements of the exhibition, the elements of the installation she was going to be putting in the gallery in Athens. So yeah, she was wonderful. Yeah. And then it culminates in the residency culminates in the open house. So on the left, you'll see McKenna, who's the young painter. That's me in the middle, and Helen Farish, the poet, is on the far left. And if you look at the far right here, am I describing it right for you guys? I'm looking at my screen. Anyway, with a crowd of people, that almost all of those people are Dimitra's family. She has a huge extended family. And if you meet someone new, a good question to ask is, are you Dimitra's cousin? And the likelihood of a yes as a response is really high. Her father's in this photograph. I took a day trip with her father and mother up to see the fishing boats in the north in Naousa. And that's Dimitra with the long hair on the left side. So that was the open house. And here, I thought this was a nice image of these 3 children looking at the pottery. Everyone was very interested in contemporary art. Dimitra has done a wonderful job of bringing international contemporary art to this small village on a Greek island. And the community and her family are very responsive.
yeah, that is an extraordinary picture in the center. I love it because it just holds so much promise, right?
Yeah, exactly. And there were even at the open house, there were 3 students from an art institute in Perikia, which is the capital of Paros, and they came, and it was really nice to spend some time with them as well. 3 young artists. Yeah.
Wonderful.
I think that might be my last one. Well, yep. There we go. Whoops.
Fantastic. Well, the residency. So I think last year was the first year with Stephen, the selection of Stephen Wolkoff.
That's right.
So we were just so pleased to be able to, I mean, I hope they continue to do it. Dimitra's just wonderful to work with. And I think that opportunity, your story sort of exemplifies that whole idea of going with a particular intention. But once you get there, like your use of the metallic material that you brought. But then once you get there, realizing, wait, this is completely different than what I had expected. And yeah, that part of it, I think that serendipitous kind of, revelation of the materials that you're using in a completely different way is wonderful. So
Yeah, the magic of the place was tangible. And, again, I'm glad that I had a project that I was grounded in beginning, right? Because that gave me some soil to till right away. And then what emerged was wonderful, a wonderful surprise. And also exactly what I needed. I have an exhibition in LA right now, and that went up and opened while I was in Greece. And I wasn't sure how that was going to be, but it was wonderful because I could enjoy it without worrying. And then there was an artist talk, and there's a reception for DTLA this weekend. So it's not that I missed the whole of the show, but um, I got to really let go and continue in my art journey while the nuts and bolts of exhibition were going on without me. Yeah.
sure. So it's a bit of a little bit of a more objective perspective of your own,
Exactly.
and I love the collaboration aspect of it, that lack, and I'm not sure what it's like in this environment that you're in now, but that lovely lack of competition where it's just more collaborative, and you're all just in that exploring mode of figuring out how your work intertwines, if it does. And it seemed like you and was it Helen?
Yeah.
Yeah, it seemed like your work did. And I think that's really my understanding in conversations with Max about these kinds of programs are ideally exactly what happened to you, which is this idea that friendships are made, and collaborative efforts are formed, and it just results in a broadening far beyond the physical transplant of you there in Alyki.
Yeah. Completely. And how lucky I was to have had two such marvelous co-residents.
Well, it's great. We thank you so very much for highlighting this. And like I said, hopefully soon we will start to see some of these images on the Torrance Facebook page. Any that you want to share with me, I'm happy to put on our website.
Great.
Yeah, I would love that. I love for the members to see exactly where their contributions go,
Okay.
and this kind of support is fantastic. We just had a very successful, as part of Trist and Nomad in the summer. I think
Yeah.
maybe just before you left.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, we had a wonderful opportunity to offer some artwork for collectors, and those proceeds were basically allowed us to support this particular opportunity for you to go. And so for me, that's really kind of what the whole organization is about. It's about supporting artists through the offering of their work, but then also through the experience of you being able to do the artist in residency. So
Well, I'm infinitely grateful.
we were beyond happy to do it. And like you said, working with Demetra has been amazing, even with Stephen last year. So we're really looking forward to the next one. And we hope that you'll stay, connected somehow to the Torrance Art Museum. It's a wonderful opportunity. So
Absolutely. I'm not going anywhere.
we would love that. We would love that. Well, thank you again so very much.
You're welcome.